Yeah, subcortical brain volumes and impairment. Subcortical brain volumes and impairment in infants following prenatal stress exposure during the COVID-19 pandemic. So when it comes to maternal health in COVID-19, we understand that pregnancy is a time of positive affect for family and friends. And for some, it is also a period of significant life change, which often requires major psychosocial and emotional adjustments. Pregnant individuals represent a demographic who are especially vulnerable during natural disasters and phenomena like COVID-19, as they may face giving birth without a partner or loved one, as well as restrictions on postpartum hospital recovery, variations in social support, and possible interruptions in prenatal appointments. We've seen through the COVID-19 pandemic that there has been an increase of depression and anxiety across the general population, as well as in expectant mothers. So on the infant side of things, we understand that infant impairment traits manifest early, they have strong neurobiology, and they also remain stable over time. And it is that early temperamental traits are also predictive of preschool behavior, and difficult temperament is characterized usually as high reactivity, negative emotion, as well as low emotional flexibility. So when it comes to fetal programming and the Barker hypothesis, it's that we understand early life is a critical period in which the brain fine-tunes itself through experiences and our environment. Insufficient care or excessive stress during this time may result in permanent alterations to certain structural and physiological metabolic functions of the individual. A critical organ undergoing development at this time is the brain. And the brain is pre-programmed to unfold according to a set of genetic instructions. The Barker hypothesis kind of attacks this, saying that throughout gestation and early postnatal life, since it's such a critical time for growth and development, especially in terms of brain function, that alterations or disturbances which occur during this time may have long-lasting and pervasive effects. So what are some of these effects? Well, some studies have found that psychosocial stress alters development of the HPA axis, and the HPA axis is the main stress circuit in the brain. It is also found that psychosocial stress alters development of subcortical brain regions, the amygdala and hippocampus involved in affectivity. And when we say affectivity, we're really referring to mood regulation. Limbic structures such as the amygdala, the striatum, and the hippocampus develop early and are important regulators of the stress circuit of the HPA axis. And the caudate nucleus, a key one, helps to influence our sleep-wake cycle, hyperactivity, as well as non-hippocampal learning. So our goals for the study were to determine if perceived psychological distress experienced during COVID-19 associated with infant brain subcortical volumes in the amygdala, hippocampus, and caudate, and to examine how infant brain volumes may associate with their temperament. Our participants were part of a longer ongoing longitudinal project, Pregnancy During the COVID-19 Pandemic. It's a project that is occurring here, and my supervisor, Dr. Catherine LaBelle, is one of the heads of it. Oh, sorry. Some of the exclusion criteria for our project included premature birth, a known developmental disorder, or birth complications, as well incompletion of any of our questionnaires in the perceived stress scale, the IBQR, or the EPDS. Our T1 and T2 weighted imaging was collected on a GE MR750W scanner at the Alberta Children's Hospital. A multiple linear regression model was used to test for our hypothesis, and in our model, we included infant sex, total intracranial volume, maternal education, and household income. To segment our images, we worked very closely with the IB team out of University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and they provided us with parcellated brain images that included amygdala, caudate, and hippocampal volumes from each hemisphere. So our results showed that perceived psychological distress was not associated with any of our subcortical volumes, and that the amygdala and hippocampal volumes were not significantly related to any dimensions of infant impairment in the sample. However, we found that right and left caudate scores were significantly related to infant certainty. So what does this all mean? Well, increased infant certainty has previously been associated with externalizing behaviors in youth, and caudate volume changes are associated with worse symptoms of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So our results showing that caudate volume at 3 months is associated with infant certainty at 6 months, as reported by parents, suggest that these associations may underlie future behavioral problems within this cohort. I would like to thank my collaborators. Sorry, my screen's stuck. I'd like to thank, of course, my collaborators and those who have helped in this project. And I'd like to open up the floor to any questions if needed.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Te Amo. Okay, so if there are any questions again, please use the raise hand function. Lonnie, we have a question from you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm glad we got to hear your talk. I think it's a super, super interesting data set that you all are working on, and really obviously topical. I was wondering if you see that the perceived stress is highly associated with exposure to COVID, either through actually contracting it or through some sort of like closer association with the healthcare industry or specific like media outlets or anything like that.
Of course. The truth is, I don't have the specific answers for that question, but I will say that there is a measure in the study that we call our objective hardship scale, which does measure the scope of stress associated with the number of cases that were in an area, things from like, messaging from the media, and that's the objective portion of our stress scale, where the perceived stress is how one feels that they were able to control any of the factors around them during the course of the pandemic. And the objective hardship scale is something that's currently still being fine-tuned out.
That'll be really, really interesting to see how those compare.
Yeah, very interesting. Mahler also has his hand up, so I will pass it to him.
Thanks, Matt. Very interesting study, really nice findings. I'm sure there's a lot more to come out of this data set, and I look forward to seeing what that might be. Just a quick question. Do you have any biological measures there that you're going to be looking to integrate, either from how the maternal state predicts what's going on in the children, or anything in the children themselves? What are the plans with that?
Sorry, when you say biological measures, do you mean like measures of like cortisol and things like that that's related to stress?
Yeah.
No, currently for the study, or at least especially for my portion of the study, there's no biological measures that we're looking to introduce, although it does raise some really interesting questions on what we could possibly do with this data set in the future.
Sorry, one more follow-up. Are there plans to follow up on these kids and look at them kind of
Yes.
longitudinally? Okay, great.
Yes, they are. So this is the 3-month cohort, and now we're transitioning into the 1-year-old cohort. And actually by March is when we should have our last scheduled 3-month-old, and we're going to continue to follow these children as we go on.
Yeah, that's cool. That's what I was actually going to ask too. Lonnie has her hand up again, so I'll pass it back to her.
I believe we have some time, so I'll indulge myself here. I was curious if you assess anything about coping mechanisms or strategies that people employ, and how that, if you mentioned it briefly. Sorry, I missed it.
Not specifically in my study in terms of coping mechanisms and social support. However, we do have some other studies in our lab that looked at the effects of the mediating effects of social support during the pandemic to see if they offset any of those depressive or anxiety symptoms in terms of functional connectivity of the brain rather than specific subcortical brain volumes.